So what are we, really? Are we just a ghost in the machine? A soul that's just, temporarily driving this body around? Or is there no separation at all? You might think these are modern questions, but nope. For the earliest Christian thinkers, this was the big one. It was the fundamental question, and it sparked a debate that would literally shape Western thought for the next 2,000 years.
Okay, so the whole entire debate, it really just boils down to this one powerful question. Is our true self a spiritual, rational soul that's just, using a physical body? Or are we a totally inseparable mix of mind and matter, where the body is just as crucial to who we are as the soul? Believe me, the answer you pick changes absolutely everything.
All right, here's the game plan for how we're going to unpack all this. First, we're going to look at the puzzle in Genesis that kicked the whole thing off. Then, we'll dive into the two big competing schools of thought that popped up, the spiritual human versus the whole human. After that, we'll see how this absolute genius, Augustine, came in with a totally new answer. And finally, we'll see how this ancient debate is still with us today.
So, you know how every great debate has an origin story, right? Well, this one starts right at the very beginning. I mean, the beginning in the book of Genesis. And here was the problem. Early readers found what looked like two different, maybe even conflicting, stories about how humans were created sitting right next to each other.
And this is the absolute core of the puzzle. See, on the one hand, Genesis 1 tells us we're made in the image and likeness of God. That sounds pretty divine, right? Spiritual. But then you flip the page to Genesis 2, and it says we're formed from dust from the ground. Totally earthly, totally material. So which one is it? Are we divine spirit, or are we basically just mud? This one little contradiction, it planted the seed for a huge philosophical showdown.
So, from that Genesis puzzle, two major camps of thought basically emerged. They were centered in these ancient hubs of learning, Alexandria in Egypt and Antioch over in what's now Turkey. And each one came up with a completely different answer to that big question, what does it mean to be human?
And you can see the split so clearly right here. On one side, you've got the Alexandrians. They were super influenced by Greek philosophy, especially Plato. They believed the image of God was only in our rational soul, a thing they called the nous. For them, the body was just a temporary container, maybe even a prison. But then you have the Asian Antiochian school, and they pushed back hard. They said, no way, the image of God is in the whole person, body and soul. For them, the body wasn't a prison at all. It was absolutely essential.
Okay, let's zoom in on Camp 1, the Alexandrian idea of the spiritual human. Now, these thinkers, they were all about the Greek ideal of pure, perfect reason. So for the Alexandrians, the magic word was nous. And this wasn't just, thinking in general. It was something more. It was the pure, divine spark of reason inside of us. This, they argued, was the part of us that truly reflected God. And the messy, emotional, physical body, well, to them, that was the dust from the ground part from Genesis. It was something you had to control, to discipline, to overcome, so you could free that pure, divine nous.
And this quote from Origen, who was a huge deal in the Alexandrian school, just nails their whole viewpoint. He's basically saying that our true essence, that image of the Creator, has zero to do with our physical body. He connects the body with the fall of man, with being formed from the mud of the earth. So for Origen, it's simple. Your spiritual self is your real self.
But of course, that was only one side of the story. Let's look at Camp 2, the Asian Antiochian school. They came back with the idea of the whole human, and they argued that writing off the body was a massive mistake.
Okay, so their key term was soma, the Greek word for body, and they had a totally different take on it. They didn't see the soma as a cage or a limitation at all. For them, it was a good, valuable, and essential part of God's creation. I mean, their logic was pretty powerful. If God himself chose to become human in a physical body, the incarnation of Christ, then how could the body possibly be a bad thing? It had to be precious.
And this powerful little Latin phrase from a writer named Tertullian pretty much became their rallying cry. Caro cardo salutis. It means, the flesh is the hinge of salvation. So what's that all about? It means salvation is not about your soul escaping your body. No, it's about saving the whole person, flesh and all. The body is the very hinge that God's whole plan for humanity swings on. Pretty cool, right?
So for centuries, this debate just raged on and on. Are we the soul or are we the whole thing? Then, in the late 4th century, this bishop from North Africa, Augustine of Hippo, shows up. And Augustine, he didn't just pick a side. He basically walked onto the field, blew the whole thing up, and built something completely new.
See, Augustine's big idea, his breakthrough, was to stop looking for the image of God in just one part of us, like the soul or the body. He said you're looking in the wrong place. It's not in a part, it's in a structure of three, which perfectly mirrors the Holy Trinity.
And where did he find this Trinity? Inside the human mind itself. He argued that our mind has three functions that are separate but totally unified. First, there's memory. That's where we store knowledge of ourselves and of God. Then, intelligence. That's where we actually understand all that knowledge. And finally, will. That's how we love and act on it. So for Augustine, this whole dynamic, three-part thing, memory, intelligence, and will, that was the true image of the three-in-one God.
And this super famous line from his book Confessions, it just shows you how personal and internal his whole idea was. For him, the great human drama wasn't the soul fighting the body. No, it was about our internal self, our memory, our mind, our will, being restless, never satisfied until it finds its way back to God, its source.
Okay, but this brings up a huge, obvious question, right? If the very structure of our mind reflects God, then why are we so flawed? Why do we mess things up so badly all the time? Why is history just filled with so much pain and error? Well, you can bet Augustine had an answer for that too.
He argued that our will, our ability to choose, is fundamentally weakened. It gets pulled off course by something he called concupiscence. You can just think of it as this deep, baked-in tendency towards selfish desires. And because of this internal pull, our will isn't really truly free to choose what's good all by itself. It needs help. It needs divine grace, what he called an auxilium, which just means help, to come in, heal it, and set it straight. And this set up a whole new dynamic, a crucial tension between our flawed human freedom and God's helping grace.
So, what happened with all these ideas? Did they just fade away? Not even close. These ancient debates about the soul, the body, the will, they basically set the stage for the next millennium and a half of Western thought, philosophy, and even science.
Each of these big ideas left a massive echo. That Alexandrian focus on the soul, it went on to fuel centuries of Christian mysticism. But really, it was Augustine's model of the mind, memory, intellect, and will, that became the foundational blueprint for how the West thought about being human. And his idea of a will that stuck between its own weaknesses and its need for divine help, man, that turned into one of the longest-running debates in all of Western philosophy.
And that brings us all the way back to right now. Think about it. When we talk about the mind-body problem in philosophy, or when we get into those intense debates about whether an AI could ever be truly conscious, aren't we, in a way, still wrestling with the very same questions? Are we a soul stuck in a body? Are we a totally unified whole? Or are we, like Augustine thought, something more complex, an internal structure that's defined by what we remember, what we understand, and in the end, by what we choose to love? 2,000 years have passed, and the questions are still right here with us.